Right then.
Go ahead,
Roshan.
Divya. You're good to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session for building the Zero Trust Foundations. And I'm Divya, and I'm working as a technical specialist for Microsoft. And today I want you to take you through the journey of Zero Trust. So, implementing a Zero Trust security model can be very intimidating for many organizations. But if you start planning your identity and endpoint security, it will definitely help you ease your journey. The global pandemic has put all of us on the accelerated path of digital transformation. And it has brought to light many difficult challenges that the organizations are facing today. The traditional network and security parameter model has definitely disappeared. Where we work has evolved to a mix of location and model from remote to hybrid. No matter where workers are, they are accessing variety of tools which are essential to be productive. And on top of this, organizations are also dealing with increased volume and sophisticated threat attacks. We have seen and heard about the headlines for Nobelium and colonial pipeline attacks, just to name the few. So the threat landscape has continued to evolve. Cyber attacks are on the rise during the pandemic. Rush to scale remote work last year has caused many potential security vulnerabilities and gaps. The use of personal devices at home to access your work data, it has become difficult to manage and protect your devices. And on top of that, organizations lack security personnel which are skilled, and they must keep up with the ever-changing and evolving data privacy and industry regulations. The new reality requires a zero-trust approach to the security. So zero trust is a security framework that responds to the need of individuals and organizations in new reality. The zero trust approach considers three principles or three key pillars. First is verify explicitly, which means that do not assume. Always authenticate and authorize based on the available data points such as your user, identity, location, device, health, and applications. Always use principle of least privileged access and adopt a policy-based access model. Limit your users' access to only what they need and when they need it. And finally, always assume breach and have this mindset to design that every element of your system can be breached. Minimize your attack surface area for breaches and employ a security strategy to prevent the lateral movement across your network. With zero trust, you can employ these principles by ensuring that every request is strongly authenticated and authorized within policy constraints, and you inspect the anomalies before granting the access. Everything from the user's identity to application to verify the request and prevent breach. And to limit the impact of the potential breaches, you can apply the segmented policies, principles of least privilege access, and use analytics to help and detect and respond quickly to the threats. Zero trust approach should be extended to these principles through your entire digital estate, which includes your identities, endpoints, apps, data, infrastructure, and networks. And it serves as an integrated end-to-end security strategy. So let's first start with the identities. Identities are basically a front door to provide access to any resource or identities. So identities, whether they are people, services, they define the zero trust control plane. And an identity attempt to access any resource, we need to verify it with a strong authentication and ensure access is compliant and follow the principles of least privilege. Next is the endpoints. So once the identity has been granted access to the resources, data can flow into variety of different devices, be it IoT devices, smartphones, BYOD, your managed devices, partner devices, customer devices, or on-prem devices. So these different kind of devices increase the attack surface area and that require we monitor and enforce the device health and compliance to ensure the secure access. Next is the applications. Applications provide an interface from where the data is accessed and consumed. They can be legacy applications which are on-premise, lifted and shifted to the cloud, or the modern SaaS applications. Control and technology should be applied to discover the shadow IT, ensure appropriate in-app permissions are there, gated access based on real-time analytics, monitor for abnormal behaviors, and control user actions within the application session, and validate all the security configurations are in place. Next is the data. So security teams are focused on protecting the data. Wherever possible, always ensure that data remains safe if it leaves your organization, apps, infrastructure, network, and discover data from different resources within your organization and identify what are your crown jewels. So these are the confidential data which should be classified, labeled, and encrypted, and access should be restricted based on these attributes. Next is the infrastructure. Infrastructure can be anything which represents your on-premise servers, cloud-based VMs or the servers, microservices, your containers, registries, or the Kubernetes or the kube services. They represent a critical threat vector. Always provide just-in-time access and use telemetry to detect your attacks and your anomalies or abnormal behavior, and automatically block and always flag the risky behavior. Next is the networks. So data is ultimately accessed over your network. So it is very important to apply the security controls over the network to enhance visibility and help prevent attackers to make the lateral movement across your network. The network should always be micro-segmented, and real-time threat protection should be applied. End-to-end encryption, analytics, and monitoring should be done. So each of these elements acts as a source of a signal, a control plane for enforcement, and they are critical resources which needs to be defended. So you should appropriately spread your investments across each of these elements to gain or have the maximum return on your investment and to provide the maximum protection. So the foundation for any great zero trust security always start with securing your identities and the endpoint. So identity-based attacks such as the password breaches are one of the most common attacks. And you won't believe that 80% of the breaches are involved the users lost or the stolen passwords. And with workers being distributed across different geographic areas, there are a variety of devices which they use to access. And these unsecured devices put your data at risk. The studies have found that around 60% of your BYOD devices are not even known and are secured by your IT department. So having a secure modern identity and endpoint management implementation is very critical for a zero trust journey. And with IT and security teams familiar with managing the identity and endpoint, it makes a very logical place to start with when setting the foundations for zero trust security model. So by building a zero trust foundation with securing your identities and endpoints can help accelerate your journey to the cloud with the use of modern identity and endpoint management solutions. It will secure your hybrid workforce and ensure always that the critical data and resources are protected. Transform your employees' experience to ensure seamless and single sign-on to applications as well as the resources. And customize secure access for all user types from frontline workers to your end customers. So let's dive into each of these pillars and see how securing your identity endpoints can help achieve these critical business initiatives. Now, to start any zero trust journey, you need to manage your endpoints as well as your identity in the cloud. This means you have to modernize your identity and endpoint management solutions. So how do you begin with your identity endpoint modernization? There are three basic strategies. Modernize your authentication and manage identities in the cloud. Manage your devices. Manage and unify all your apps with an integrated identity and unified device management solution. With Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, which is known as MEM, you can manage both your identities and devices fully in the cloud, and you can also migrate those into your own pace and operate in a hybrid kind of a model if required. So to modernize your identities and authentication, we recommend the following strategies. First of all, move to modern authentication. What does that mean is only allow the authentication with modern protocols. Modern authentication allows you to implement the capabilities like MFA and conditional access. By using tools like Azure AD Connect and staged rollout, you can test the group of users with cloud authentication capabilities like MFA and conditional access, as well as identity protection and governance, etc. Always block the legacy authentication protocols for MFA to be effective. This is because legacy protocols like POP SMTP, and MAPI can't enforce MFA and conditional access, and it always a preferred entry point for the attackers. If your environment is ready to block the legacy authentication to improve your tenant's protection, you can accomplish this easily with using the conditional access policies. And finally, if you're operating in the hybrid model, sync your on-premise identities with the cloud. You can sync your identities by using AD Connect tool, so the users gain a common identity for access to the resources, no matter where they are located and from which device they are trying to access. Now, next is to modernize your endpoints. To modernize your endpoints, you can take the path at the cloud at your own pace with Microsoft Endpoint Manager or MEM. So many of the customers are still using Configuration Manager, which is their on-premise solution for managing the Windows devices. Microsoft Intune is the management tool to deploy and manage your mobile devices and cloud managed devices, which includes your Windows 10 or Android, iOS, or macOS. With MEM, you can simplify a modern management journey by bringing together Configuration Manager and Intune into a single unified management solution. With new tenant attached capabilities in Endpoint Manager, it provides the most flexible path for Configuration Manager clients or the customers to gain benefits of the cloud without enrolling their endpoints into Intune. You will simply connect your Configuration Manager hierarchy to Intune, and you will get plethora of remote actions, analytics, as well as you can also deploy few endpoint security policies on your Configuration Manager clients. Some organizations may start this in phase for the modern management, and that's completely fine. Organizations which are ready to take the next steps can also use co-management, where a single client will have both the configuration manager as well as the Intune client installed on the device at the same time, and each being the management authority for different type of workloads, which we can shift from configuration manager to Intune. Enterprises discover that this gives them a unique advantage and enable the remote users to deal with the additional challenges and uncertainties in the infrastructure. Customers can stay in any of these paths as long as they require, and the modern management is not a destination. Basically, it's a journey. So a critical step towards zero trust journey is consolidating your secure access to all the applications, whether they are on the cloud or on premises. To get started with, Azure AD can easily be synchronized with your on-premise Active Directory and to the connected HR systems, which is enabled for the external users. With this, you can enable single sign-on to all the applications, be it the on-premise applications, SaaS applications, or your custom-built applications. For your on-premise applications, you can either choose between the Azure AD App Proxy or secure hybrid access integrations with the third-party vendors such as Akamai, Citrix, Zscaler, F5. So these solutions help customers gain even provide legacy with authentication applications to which use protocol like header based and verbose authentication to access them using Azure AD. Control where, when, and who can connect to your Office applications using conditional access. Protect against lost or stolen passwords using MFA. Enable your employees to remotely access your on-premise applications with App Proxy without using VPN or to open broader access to the network for external users. Finally, as you modernize your identity endpoint management solutions, you should begin to unify your app management with single identity and endpoint management solutions. Unify your all apps for better visibility and control into apps being used in your organization, and give your end users a more secure way to access the all apps which they need with single sign-on. With Azure AD and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can connect all your apps to the cloud, whether it's cloud applications, on-premise applications, desktop applications, or the mobile applications. And if you have ADFS, you can easily migrate your ADFS applications to Azure so that you can manage all your applications from a single control plane. With hybrid work at the norm, it's critical that you secure your hybrid workforce, and it starts with identity and endpoint management. Some strategies which can help you secure your hybrid workforce includes verify user identities with strong authentication, Allow only compliant and trusted devices to access to the resources. Configure adaptive access policies, which are based on context and risk assessment. And safeguard your resources on your ongoing basis with identity and access lifecycle management. And with Azure AD and MEM can help you achieve these strategies so that you can secure your hybrid workforce. So passwords are the weakest link in your security chain, and they are the single point of failure without any additional verification. And moreover, the passwords are something which is loved by the attackers. That's why we always believe that it is always very necessary that we believe strongly that if you do one thing to protect yourself, it should be that you turn on MFA, which can provide 99.9% of your security and identity related attacks. We support broad range of authentication options which can fit into your business needs, and it also includes the passwordless authentication. There are few options for the passwordless authentication which an organization can adopt. One of them is the Microsoft Authenticator, which provides the greatest flexibility, convenience, and cost. We recommend use the Microsoft Authenticator mobile app, which is available on any of your app stores, be it Apple and Android. And it supports biometrics, push notification, one-time passcodes, and it works for all the Azure AD connected applications. And it's free and work with MFA and Azure AD. Other option is Windows Hello, which is built into the Windows 10 and it provides a built-in experience. We recommend using Windows Hello and it provides authentication using PIN, your fingerprint, or your facial recognition. The other option is using the FIDO2 security keys, which is available from the partners like Ubico and HID Global. So we know a major challenge for managing the devices is different pane of glass which needs to be administered. We can have different tools or the administration plane for your on-premise devices, which includes Windows 10 and servers. Or we can have a different, administration console and tools to manage your mobile devices, or maybe a different tool to manage your Mac OS devices. And it becomes very difficult to manage the devices when you have different control pane of glass to manage them. We also know that organizations have multitude of different devices to manage. So there's a need of a unified approach to endpoint management. And there's a need to manage all your devices in one place with a single pane of glass wherever these devices are at the moment, whether they are working remotely within the office or anywhere in the geographic location. With Microsoft Endpoint Manager or MEM, you can accomplish this goal. Manage all your endpoints and application from a single pane of glass. Maybe you can use your on-premise capabilities like Configuration Manager, and which have been brought together with cloud benefits with Intune into single MEM portal. Extend your on-premise infrastructure with cloud security. Manage your Configuration Manager and role devices over the internet, either by using Cloud Management Gateway or attaching it to Intune with tenant attached. Securely enable your BYOD or corporate-owned endpoints to securely access your remote resources. So we know that every organization is different in terms of devices and policies you have in place. Some companies may want more control of managing devices and the apps and data that live on them. Others may have BYO policies or variety of area of workers when protecting devices would be challenging, such as retail or first line workers. There are options to protect your data and the applications, as well as the data that live within those applications. Ability to manage your devices at the mobile device level is known as MDM or the mobile device management. With MDM, you can enroll your devices into the Intune, and the organizations will have full control over your device so that the device is compliant and it adhere to all your security policies of your company with compliance policies. And you can manage email profiles, Wi-Fi, VPN, and so on. Also with MDM, you have the ability to provide the conditional access control based on where the users are accessing the data from. And it provides a contextual based access where you can restrict access to the managed devices, including removing the corporate data from the devices when it is required. The another approach is mobile application management, which is MEM, that works well in the BYOD scenarios. With MEM, you can publish, push, configure, monitor, and update your mobile applications for any user, be it remote worker or an employee. In the background, you can also employ the Intune app protection policies to these applications to keep the corporate data safe by controlling how and when the data is being shared outside of trusted applications. It provides the application layer control and compliance while maintaining the rich and familiar user experience. In this case, users don't have to enroll their devices, and there would be very little impact on the end user's product, basically the experience. So let's take a more closer look at how it works. So there's a unique approach to the data protection with app protection policies, which allows us to protect the data at the application layer without the need of the traditional containerization or sandboxing. And because we leverage the multiple user identities in our approach for the applications, where the policies are intelligent enough to only apply the data protection policies at the corporate account. So these capabilities can include the encryption of the data at the rest, applying the pins or the credentials at the application level, restrict cut, copy, paste actions, perform the application level selective wipe, and managing and controlling the web browsing experience. Intune has been very closely working with the office to provide this application protection strategy. And Intune is the only mobile device management solution which provides a very fine and granular control over the office applications without compromising the end user experience. With MAM, there's a thin wall between the corporate and the personal data, which will not impact the end user experience. Employees can use their favorite application like Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, which they love. And at the same time, IT can protect the data which is contained on these applications and on the devices. This is done using the multiple identity profile, when the user signs in with their corporate credentials, then all these application protection policies like cut, copy, paste are applied. And if the application end user is signing in from their personal account for a personal work, these policies will not take effect. Also, with the Intune app wrapping tools, companies can also enable the MAM policies for the line of business applications. So they can apply the Intune app protection policies to secure their apps and data. So if we take let's say take an example to explain here. So here we take example of a user named Elisa, who has newly enrolled her device and is compliant and ready to go. So she has maintained her personal experience by arranging all her favorite desktop icons on the screen and aligned as per her experience. She has the corporate applications as well as the personal applications. So with new multi-identity management feature, when Elisa logs into the Office application using the corporate account, all the MAM policies which has been pushed by her IT admin would be in place. But if she log in with personal account to do some work outside of the company, then she can enjoy the seamless experience and no MAM policies will come into picture. So now let's take a look how this works basically. So the user Elisa receives an email which is basically a company data on her Outlook account with an attached Excel sheet, which contains the information about the corporate account and which she needs for her report. So what Elisa does is she opens an email, she opens the Excel attachment in the Excel mobile application and finds the information which she needs for her report. She copies the information from this Excel sheet and she tries to paste it in her personal application, which is Note or Notepad. So when she tries to copy paste that information, she'll not be able to do so because Notepad is not a protected application and is not managed by the IT. But at the same time, if she tries to copy this data on the Microsoft Word mobile app, which is managed by Intune, she'll be successfully paste the information. Now she wants this data to be saved or the report to be saved for her personal OneDrive account. But since the personal OneDrive is not a managed application or protected by organization, she'll not be able to save the data in her personal OneDrive. But when she tries to save the data on the OneDrive for business, she will be able to successfully copy that data and it would be always accessed from her corporate account. So this way, IT pros have prevented the leakage of the important company data and it makes sure that the information never lands into the wrong hands. So here how the MEM and user experience will look like. So let's take an example of a user, Tom, who is a employee of a Woodgrove bank. Now, after taking a walk or the running in the morning, he got an email on his Outlook mobile that the company has launched a new type of a loan and he has received a sample form for how anyone can apply for a loan. So what he did was he opened an email from the Megan Brown, and he basically sees an attachment. And this attachment is a kind of a guarantee form for the new type of loan which the his bank has introduced. So what he does is he read go through the form, and there are few queries which he has. So he selected this portion of a form and he copies it and he tried to paste it in his personal note. But since this note is not a managed app and is not protected by the organization, when he tries to paste it, he will say that this data cannot be pasted. Now, what he did is he again opens an Outlook and he composes a new email and he types and he's planning to send that section of a form to her to his colleague, which is Miriam Graham. So he typed an email and copied that selected portion of the form, and he's able to paste that in the Outlook, and he's able to send that information to her colleague. This is because Outlook is a protected app, and all the MAM policies are being controlled by the IT organization. Now let's take a look at how we can control the access of the data to only the compliant devices. So once we have verified identities, we may need to make sure that endpoint devices and workforce are protected and are compliant. Restricting access and configuring policies that prevent vulnerable and compromised devices is very critical to protecting your hybrid workforce. You can secure your endpoints in multiple ways, such as enrolling your devices in MDM and applying the data protection policies on your devices and apps. It is also important to monitor the device risk using threat detection tools. While device management ensures that the right configurations and security policies are in place, threat detection will prevent the compromised device from accessing your data. With MAM integrates with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to quickly detect, respond, and remediate any kind of security vulnerabilities. Now, in a hybrid environment, it's very critical that only right people have access to the right resources on secure devices, and they can access the data from anywhere and only the data which they are authorized to. So, with conditional access is an intelligent policy engine which is used to build to accomplish this challenge. It's very robust and it provides the contextual based access, and it controls how you define your specific conditions, how users are authenticated. And then based on those conditions, it will provide access to the specific app and data. You can customize the policies and manage the automated policies. And you can also get the detailed reporting on how the policies are applied for each sign-in. The conditional access enables the organizations to fine-tune the policies based on the contextual, whether it's for users, devices, location, user session risk, device risk. Gives you a better control on how a user can access the corporate resources. You can also challenge the users for multi-factor authentication, limit their access, allow or deny the access to the resources. Let's take a look at how basically conditional access works. So conditional access takes over 40 terabytes of identity related signals, which includes the user behavior, location, state of devices, applications being accessed, and the risk score of the sign-in. Using machine learning, our technology which analyzes the signals and determine what appropriate access policies has to be applied, which will either allow the user to access the resources, limit it, or either block the access. An example can be, let's say, during the pandemic, most of you might have shifted to your hometowns. And if the MFA policies have been in place, and if your user tries to attempt the resource from a new location, when the user enters the end user credential, then the conditional access will say, oh, now this user is accessing the data from the new location, which I'm not familiar of. So let's throw an MFA challenge to the user, such as push notification from authenticator or anything, so that the user has to prove their identity to access the device or the resources. So these capabilities can also extend to Azure, where we can define the access policies for accessing the cloud resources. And there's something new introduced in conditional access policies, which is continuous access evaluation. So once the session has been established to access the resources, so conditional access will continuously monitor your ongoing session. And if during the session any of the policy has been violated, then conditional access is smart enough to terminate the session, and the user will no more have access to that resource. So gaining visibility into the endpoints, accessing your corporate resources is the first step for zero trust strategy. So companies are proactive in protecting the PCs and from the vulnerabilities. And attack when mobile devices are often, ignored and unnoticed and go without protection. To ensure you are not exposing your data at risk, you need to monitor every endpoint for risk and employ granular access controls to deliver appropriate level of access based on the organization policies. Let's say, for example, if a person is trying to access the data from the jailbroken device, then based on the policies, his access can be completely blocked so that the device is not exposed to the known vulnerabilities. And not only with the Defender endpoint, but Microsoft has tied up with various third-party vendors to provide the threat vulnerability and assessment for mobile devices. Maybe it Lookout, Semantics, Imperium, and so on. So once we know that information about the device health and compliance status, we can use conditional access policies to enforce even more granular risk-based access policies. So we can ensure that no device with the malware detected is allowed to access the company resources until it is remediated. And also we can restrict the login from the unmanaged devices, or maybe we can provide the limited access to those devices. So once the access has been granted, it needs to be continuously assessed. SS is easy to grant, but it is very difficult to track. You need the ability to trace who has access to the resources, and you should be smart enough to quickly revoke the access when the user no longer needs that access. With Azure AD Identity Governance, which is built into Azure AD P2, you can protect, monitor, and audit access to the critical assets. Especially go into the managing of the access lifecycle for any user by managing access based on role group which the user is in. You can automate the role-based access controls that people only have the administrative rights to the resources which they need. So what can be done is you can create an access package which will include your sites, applications, or the groups which the user needs access to. And once the user joins in, they can request the access package using the My Access portal. So once the access package is requested, it will go through its own approval workflow where it can be approved by its manager or whoever the approver is entitled to. So once the approver has approved his request, the user will have the access to those applications for the specific amount of time for which he needs. And along with that, you can also attach the access reviews to those access packages where the user can himself or his manager can review whether the end user still need access to those resources or not. If the access is not needed, then those accesses can be revoked. And also Azure AD is smart enough to provide the system recommendations to the approver that, hey, if that user has not signed into Azure AD for that particular login time of, let's say, 30 days, then access is automatically revoked. And finally, you can retrieve all these audit details and reports for user provisioning and sign-in activities, which will help you meet your compliance regulations and to see who has access to what resources. So here's a little demo of how the conditional access works. So here what we are trying to do is we have creating two conditional access policies. So if the device is not hybrid Azure AD joined, then those devices will be only allowed to access the Office and SharePoint through the browser app. But if the device is hybrid Azure AD joined, then those users can access the Office and SharePoint sites by using the browser as well as the thick clients, as in the application which is installed. So here we have a test user and three applications, Exchange, SharePoint, and Salesforce. The condition which we have applied is applicable to Windows devices. And if it's a browser-based application and it's for all device, and the device has to be hybrid Azure AD joined. And here we will apply the grant controls. It will require the device to be hybrid Azure AD joined or challenge for MFA. And there's a second policy which will create. Again, the user here is a sample user. And the applications are Exchange, SharePoint, and Salesforce. And the conditions are the device is Windows device. And the client applications, all the modern apps, modern authentication, Exchange, or the other clients, the access would be any device which is any status, and it includes the hybrid Azure AD joined devices, the access would be blocked. So any device except hybrid Azure AD joined devices, the access would be blocked here. So now let's try to see the end user experience. So here, this is a machine. And first of all, we'll establish a fact that it is hybrid Azure AD join. So here, we'll see that this machine is joined to Azure, on-premise Active Directory. And we'll run command ts-cmd status to see that this machine is registered in Azure AD. Azure AD join is yes. Now, when they try to access Outlook, SharePoint through web browser, they will be able to access it. And so as you can see, they can access Outlook, as well as Salesforce application from the hybrid Azure AD joint device. Now, as you can see, they are also able to access Outlook from the thick client, which is the Outlook client, which is installed on the device. Now let's switch gears to the device, which is workgroup joined, and it is not hybrid Azure AD joined. So first of all, we'll establish the fact that this machine is workgroup joined. This machine is workgroup joined here, and it is not added to Azure AD. So we'll run ds-cmd status command and see that this device is not Azure AD joined. And when they try to access the Outlook from the browser, they will be able to access it. And they will be challenged for the MF. Okay. And as you can see, the user is able to access the Outlook app only from the browser. Now, when he tries to access the Outlook from the application, and when he tries to add his account, so you can see that sign-in is successful, but he does not meet the criteria to access the resource. So his access from the Outlook app has been denied. All right. So once your workforce has been secured, now you need to deliver the seamless experience so that which will transform your end users or the employee experience. So with Azure AD and MEM, you can help your employees transform the end user experience by quickly onboarding the employees with streamlined provisioning, connecting your workforce to the apps with single sign-on, reduce IT overhead, and empower them so that they can manage their own identities and facilitate seamless collaboration across organizational boundaries. So creating great employee experience start with the employee onboarding. And the new employee is hired and onboarded. So with Azure AD, you can quickly onboard the users by providing access to resources so that employees can be productive on day one. So Azure AD integrates with your HR systems like Workday and SAP SuccessFactors to automate your identity lifecycle based on the HR events, and they can even write back the relevant sources to the HR data stores. So as the new employees are hired and onboarded, they can be quickly provisioned using Azure Autopilot. With Windows Autopilot, the organizations can work closely with the hardware vendors, which is build the capability into Endpoint Manager and Microsoft 365, and it will provide the zero touch or one or two click provisioning for the end users, and their devices would be up and running within few minutes. You can also automate app provisioning with the Azure AD. So once the employees have access to the devices, they can access the applications they need. And with app provisioning Active Directory, you can automatically create the user identities within your application as well. So with the Azure AD single sign-on, it eliminates the use of multiple accounts and the passwords, which is the weakest security link. With SSO, you need only one identity and password to connect all your user applications. So on average, employees are saving around 10 minutes per week, which is around 1 day in a year. While Azure AD is built on Microsoft, it is not only identity for Microsoft. You can connect different applications like Workday, ServiceNow, Google, Zoom, with all the different Azure AD applications with your on-premise applications as well as your custom applications for single sign-on. And to aid users to access those applications, end users can access these applications using My Apps portal, which is a web-based portal which employees can log in and they can quickly find the applications which they need in. Now, providing means for secure access is fundamental to user productivity. You can enhance the end user experience and make it highly adaptable by empowering the users to manage their own identity wherever possible. And they can take, it will take the burden from the IT and so that they can more focused on the more critical security issues. So the My Account portal is one-stop shop for users to manage their own identities, where they can self-service password to the SSPR or the self-service password reset. They can request the access packages, as I explained earlier, and also they can update their mobile phone number. And because when they forgot their passwords, with few clicks they will be able to reset the passwords. Finally, for employees to have a great experience, they need to be able to easily collaborate with the partners uh, or your business stakeholders. Managing access for external users separately from your directory can leave many security gaps. With Azure AD external identities, you can easily invite your partners and collaborate with them, and you can manage your access to the resources. With Azure AD external identities, a set of capabilities allow you to share your resources or applications outside of the organization. And again, with entitlement management or identity governance, you can maintain the entire life cycle, and you can even remove your external partners or collaborators when they do not need access to your resources. So implementing a zero trust security model is basically a journey that starts with securing your identities and endpoints. A strong identity and endpoint foundation can help accelerate key business initiatives and modernize your IT, secure your hybrid workforce, as well as transform your employee experience. So as I shared in the beginning, the changes in how and where we work and increase in security threats require a new set of principles and security into in place, which is zero trust. So taken together, Azure AD and MEM, along with other security approaches, can help ensure only the right people have right access to the right resources. So if I have few minutes, maybe I want to elaborate more on how you can protect the network and infrastructure, which is very less talk about if you see any industry narratives or the or any adaptation for the zero trust.
Yeah,
So
sure,
for
Divya, go ahead. We have 15 minutes left,
all right,
basically.
I'll take 5 more minutes. So for network, which is your underlying configuration, it provides secure access to the resources. So beginning with the concept of explicitly verifying your interaction with the resources on the network, whether it's on premise or on the cloud, it should be verified. So you can start with protecting the network with Azure Front Door, which is your level 7 security and entry point in the Microsoft Cloud Services, along with the application gateway, which is Web Traffic Load Balancer, and WAF, which is Web Application Firewall. So you can use all these technologies to create policies in place and provide the appropriate controls, which will help verify the user's identity and it will prevent the SQL injection attacks. Now let's take a principle of least privilege and assume breach for the network controls. This is where the network segmentation will come into picture and it will prevent the lateral movements in case a breach happens or if the account has been compromised. So in that case, the attack would be, confined to that only network segment. With Azure Firewall, you can apply various network rules like using the source IP, destination IP, ports, and protocols. And also with application roles and the services, you can apply the intelligence that only the certain web categories and the services will be allowed to access or will be denied. And based on that, the TLS traffic would be inspected through the firewall. So there would be a curated list of sites and the services which are predefined, and we can define whether they are allowed to be accessed or denied. So these categories of sites can include the sites which leads to productivity loss or which have objectionable content or high bandwidth. And we can also configure services like Azure Virtual Desktops or Windows Update, which are allowed or denied. So you can allow or deny access based on services as well. So what advantage it will have is that you can configure your firewalls and they need not be manually updated every time based on the change of the IP address ranges. And on top of that, Azure Firewall also provide you the IDPS solutions, which is intrusion detection and prevention, which help you provide the threat intelligence and protect communication, which passes through your firewall. Also, you want to secure your network protocols and deprecate the network protocols which have been outdated and provide the end-to-end encryption, whether your data is at rest or is it in transit or is inbound or outbound. For the infrastructure, I would like to highlight few points how you can go about zero trust. Is whether infrastructure is on-premise, is in the cloud, container, PaaS, or other services. All of these represent a critical threat vector. So we need to have the proper controls in place so as to protect the firmware, your operating system, and the platform. So again, going back to the principles of zero trust, let's start with verify explicitly and how it can relate to your infrastructure. It requires to go beyond your simple checks of computer name and IP address as they keep on changing and can be easily spoofed. In this case, you will need the immutable identifiers which don't change with time, like the RBAC controls. Also, you have something called attribute-based controls, which is extension to RBAC, where you can tag the resources with those attributes, and then you can provide access to the resources based on attributes such as the finance only. If you tag the resources with finance only, the finance users will have access to those resources. So next is on continuing on the theme of least privileged access. So and assume breach. So the Azure Security Center, which is ASC, it provides the centralized monitoring and control for the resources, whether they are on-prem or on the cloud or in any cloud provider. So ASA will continue to access and strengthen the security posture, and it will raise the alerts if it finds any anomalies in the environment. With the Azure Security Center, you can also request just-in-time access for your Azure VMs, where by default, like the port 3389, which is for RDP and SSH ports are closed. If you need access to those VMs, you can specifically request for the GR just-in-time access, and those ports will be open only for 3 hours. So once 3 hours have elapsed, or you have closed the session, the port RDP and the SSH ports will also be closed. And also for the GIA access, you can also limit the number of administrators or the owner or the contributor roles which the VM can have, and those users can perform any action on behalf of the users. Also, you can use Azure Defender to harden your security. So what Azure Defender does is it basically analyzes your network communication pattern for your VMs, and it will determine whether your network security group rules, NSG rules, either they are too permissive or they are too restrictive. It will check whether what particular IP addresses which have been opened are either communicated or not, and it will raise the flags that, hey, these IPs are malicious and it needs to be blocked. And also Azure Defender provides the adaptive application management where you can specify the curated list of applications that these are my safe applications. And if any VM having those
Divya, you're breaking out. Divya, looks like we have a connection issue.
that only right people have access to right resources at the
Okay.
right time. And finally,
Divya,
collect all your applications to Azure AD. Yep.
we could not hear you for the past 1 minute or so. You were completely out. Okay, now we can.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll just reiterate
Yeah,
the
sure.
what to do's or the summarize. Reduce your on-premise infrastructure by managing all your identities and endpoints in the cloud. Ensure that devices are able to access the corporate resources as secure and compliant. Turn on MFA, which you can reduce your 99.98% of the attacks, and enforce conditional access policies to ensure right people have right access to those right resources. And finally, connect all your applications to Azure AD to enable single sign-on. And by all apps, it means whether it's on-premise applications or your custom applications. Yeah, so this is basically Microsoft's, adaptation of the zero trust framework, which is there, and we have mapped it to the Microsoft products as well. So yeah, so that's it from my side. I am done, and just one more thing I wanted to showcase. So if I have added it in the list of the resources, so this is a zero trust maturity model. If any organization is starting their zero trust journey, they can take this assessment like maybe identity and get started or anything. And once you start, it will ask you a few questions. And based on that, it will generate a report with the suggestions then how you can start with your zero trust journey. So yeah, with that, I'm done.
Divya, we have some questions, and can you share that link that you had for that assessment? That would be helpful.
Yes, so these are the resources. If anybody wants, they can take them down. And there's
Perfect.
a link for the zero trust assessment tool.
And we have a question. Can zero trust be accomplished for non-cloud components such as perimeter firewalls, example Cisco switches, on-prem servers, etc.?
Definitely, definitely. So zero trust is not only for the cloud, though it's recommended you take the resources to the cloud because cloud has more AI and ML intelligence built into it. But yeah, zero trust can also be taken for the on-premise infrastructure. But seeing the today's model on how the way we work has is going to change, then if you are confining your resources to the on-premise, it's not going to sustain for a very long time, I would say.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay. I'll just go ahead and share the link to the form, and Divya, maybe you can show the session code.
Sure, sure. So the session code is 67701.
Perfect. If anybody else have any other questions, please either raise your hand, unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat window. Divya, so far, what has been the biggest challenge in terms of adoption when it comes to zero trust model? What have you seen so far in that area? I think we lost her again. Hello? Yeah, Divya, we lost you for a bit there again. Divya, are you back now?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, there's a question if you have any blog for your ZTA journey for us to help read up on. Uh,
Okay, one second. I shared those in the resources, and there's a link for the blogs as well. There's a blog, the guidance papers, and everything. Let me share my screen again. Apologies for that.
sure. Yeah, we see it now. Okay.
So
I
this
was
is a
asking
zero
if,
trust page. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Please
I
go
had,
ahead, Justin.
no, I was just had a question about, the biggest challenges in terms of adoption that you might have come across at this point uh, for getting this model implemented with customers. Anything that you can share on that front, that'll be great.
So the biggest challenge basically, see, zero trust is not just an implementation that we are done within 1 or 2 weeks and
Right.
we are done. And it's basically a journey, so it will take a good amount of time planning. So how it is done. So the challenge we know, which we normally face, is because the Microsoft products are very closely stitched to binded together, and the signals are shared and stitched within its product. So if we take zero trust model with the Microsoft products, it's very comprehensive and good to implement. But with what happens with customers is that they have different point products and solutions in place. So sometimes stitching the signals together becomes little challenging for us. And that's where,
Got it.
we have to bring in product teams. So how the signals can be intershared between different products and how they can talk to each other.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like if I take an example, like I showed here as well, if we are using Intune for device-based risk conditional access policies, then if we use Defender for endpoint with that, it's very easy because it's just one flip, and the Defender for endpoint, it starts sharing its signals with Intune for its device
Right.
risk. And you can easily create a conditional access policy that, hey, if my device's risk is above medium or high, just block an access to that resource or the device. But it becomes difficult when we have, other third party products in place. Though Microsoft supports few third parties, but let's take an example. If we have another third party product, then integration becomes sometimes challenging for us.
Right. Okay. No, this was a great session. Thank you so much, Divya, for your time today. I
Thank you
hope
so much,
everybody learned something
everyone.
new. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope.
All
And
right.
thanks so much for your time.
Sure. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.